to me, Hudson.
I got signals. I got readings in front and behind.
There's nothing back here.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Get them out of there!
They cut the power.
How could they cut the power, man? They're animals. There's movement all over the place. 5 meters, man. 4.
Aliens. This time, it's war.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We love talking about movies and more. I'm your host, Mason Phillips, and today I've got another retro movie review for you for James Cameron's Aliens. This is the follow-up to Ridley Scott's original film, Alien. I did a review for that. You can check that out on the channel. I also did a review for Alien Romulus that just hit theaters, so go check that out. I really liked both of those movies. You can hear my thoughts on them in those videos. Before we get any further in this review, I want to ask you guys to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, let's talk about the plot. After floating in space for 57 years, Lieutenant Ripley's shuttle is found by a deep space salvage team. Upon arriving at LV-426, the Marines find only one survivor, a 9-year-old girl named Newt. But even these battle-hardened Marines with all of the latest weaponry are no match for the hundreds of aliens that have invaded the colony. I have to admit, this movie is my favorite in the entire Alien series. Now, if you're gonna ask me, where should this series be? Should it be more of an action sci-fi series or should it be more of a horror series? I'm actually gonna tell you it should be more of a horror series, and so I'm glad that they leaned into those elements in Alien Romulus back to the original Alien film, keeping that suspenseful tension. Not that Aliens doesn't have that, but more of the horror side of the series that the original Ridley Scott film has. I'm glad that Alien Romulus, that Fede Alvarez decided to keep Alien Romulus in that tone. But with Aliens, it's more of the action sci-fi element of it. This movie gave me a context for a lot of the stuff I had heard. I always knew about these memes, these lines of dialogue that were dropped, like,
Game over, man. It's game over.
or,
They mostly come at night. Mostly.
and then the classic line from Ripley at the end of the movie.
Get away from her, you bitch!
There's a lot of great classic dialogue that I knew about just being a fan of film in general. I had heard about a lot of this stuff. I knew about the Alien franchise. I knew so many things that had come from this series. But now seeing them in the proper context gives me so much more appreciation for that stuff that I'd already heard about, and going into this film, loved it. It still keeps in tone with some of the stuff that was set up in the first Alien film, and it's definitely a direct follow-up to that movie, especially keeping in with Sigourney Weaver as our lead and Ellen Ripley. I actually think she does an amazing job in both films, but I thought she was 10 times better in this movie. Not to say that she did a bad job in Alien, she didn't, but I think that James Cameron was able to pull something even more out of her. You see much more of a character depth. She's a much more multi-layered character in Aliens. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Aliens, I am going to kind of spoil this movie a little bit here and there, so I want to give you that warning up front before we go any further. But with her, the multi-layered character that she is and what they give her here in this film, talking about her daughter, the fact that she lost her daughter because Ellen Ripley had been in cryosleep for, I think, about 50 years. So her daughter has aged and has passed away, and now Ellen Ripley has awoken. She remembered her daughter as an 11-year-old girl. Her daughter has already lived a full life, and now she has to deal with the fact that she lost out on all of this time, and now her child is gone. But that also sets up the relationship that she has with Newt in the film, and the fact that they have this mother-daughter relationship. Newt even calls her mommy at the end of the movie. And so they have this mother-daughter relationship, and it's kind of a healing aspect for Ripley, because Ripley's dealing with all of this trauma with the events of Alien, trauma that is definitely worth it. I mean, if any of us had been through all of that, we would have been feeling a lot like Ripley does in this movie. And the fact that the corporation, the Weyland-Yutani Corps, doesn't want to hear her out. They're calling her crazy. They're calling her all of these other things, saying that she just is dealing with trauma, and it's just trauma for trauma's sake. And that is not the case, of course. We know what she went through. And the fact that none of them are hearing her out just leads to the events of this film. Again, nobody wants to listen to Ripley, Ripley. So of course, everything's going to go bad because nobody wants to listen to the person who's actually making sense in the movie. Happened in the first movie, happened in this movie. Nobody wants to listen to Ellen Ripley, but she's the one who might know more than anybody else in this film. It could be played bad. It could be played as, oh, we've been through this before, we're doing this again, but I think it really works with Aliens, and I actually prefer the tone and the direction that this movie went in. Yeah, it still has those horror elements, those suspenseful elements, but those action sci-fi elements, I love that, and I know that James Cameron really plays very well in that wheelhouse. He did that with the Terminator series, he's doing that with his Avatar series. He just creates these movies that are meant to be seen on a grander scale. I unfortunately wasn't able to see this movie on the big screen. I had to watch it on my laptop, but it's still a great film, and I'm sure I would have loved to have seen it on the big screen. Having seen Alien Romulus in theaters, these movies are meant to be seen in a theater, and I wish I'd had that chance when I saw the first movie and when I saw this movie. Just setting this specific tone that they created, it really works. I think James Cameron is a true visionary. If you don't think that he is, I'm telling you he is. He's one of the greatest visionary directors of our time. He may not have made many movies. He's only made about 9 or 10, I think, in his entire career. He takes his time with his projects. He puts such great care into his projects. Some of the stories may be written a little thinly at times, but it's the spectacle and everything else around it that really works with the kind of films that he creates. They're meant to be seen in a theater. They're meant to be seen with a larger audience. This film was so fun. I loved it. I do happen to prefer the sci-fi action side of the Alien series over the horror side. It's just me as a movie fan. I'm not big on the horror genre to begin with, so I do prefer more of the sci-fi action elements, but I also get a kick out of the suspenseful elements that they maintain here, and I'm glad that they maintain that and didn't just abandon that. I'm still paying homage and paying respect to the movie that came before it. It paid respect to what Ridley Scott did in that first film, still keeping in tone with a lot of the horror elements, but adding all of these sci-fi action elements into it as well. This movie, it just goes bigger. We had one alien in the first movie. Now we have aliens, and a lot of aliens. And for this being a movie that came out in the 1980s, again, I talked about it in the first movie. I'm going to talk about it again in this one. The movie holds up, still holds up, even though this is a movie that came out in the 1980s, it holds up. It's very practical. Stan Winston Studios created the Xenomorph. Stan Winston is known for doing the Jurassic Park dinosaurs and all the way up to the Iron Man suit in the original Iron Man movie. They did great with putting the Xenomorph suit together. The design of this film is amazing. Now, I want to talk about the characters. I talked a little bit about Sigourney Weaver. She's much more multi-layered. Ripley has a lot more to do, and again, she's dealing with all the trauma that she dealt with in the first film for good reason. I mean, her entire crew was wiped out. She was the only survivor of the Nostromo. So going into this, being very wary and not wanting to get involved and angry with the Weyland-Yutani Corps about what they did, of course, unbeknownst to her, they're a big reason why a lot of these events are happening in the first place. And so they're really the major enemy, the villain at the end of the day. The alien is just a tool. The alien is just doing what it does. The villain is the corporation. The villain is Paul Reiser's Carter Burke, the representative of the Weyland-Yutani Corps. And he comes off as this very friendly sort at the beginning of the film, and then, spoiler alert, it's revealed that he is still pushing forward the agenda of the corporation, cares more about the bottom line, more about the money that they're making on this operation rather than the lives that are being lost. It's that same sentimentality that Ash was pushing forward in the first Alien film, and it's what he's pushing forward here in this film. He's not the android of the situation, but he's still pushing forward the needs of the company over the needs of the people.
So I made a decision, and it was wrong. It was a bad call, Ripley. It was a bad call.
Bad call.
Right.
These people are dead, Burke!
And knowing exactly what kind of thing they're getting into. He knows how bad these aliens are. He may not have experienced it firsthand, but he knows exactly what they can do. Doesn't care. Cares about the bottom line. This is just a straight up weasel. The cast is so great. I love the supporting cast. I didn't think the supporting cast in the first film really stood out a whole lot. You know, they all did their part. But outside of Sigourney Weaver and Ian Holm in the film, I didn't think that the rest of the cast really stood out all that much. But they definitely do here in Aliens. Bill Paxton is amazing. I loved his character. I was annoyed with his character at the beginning of the film for the first part of the film, but then towards the end, I was rooting for him. I wanted him to make it out of the situation. I was rooting for his character right there at the very end. Bishop, the android, he was awesome. You know, I was a little wary of him too. You know, we just dealt with Ash in the first film, so I wasn't so sure about Bishop. There were a couple points where I thought Bishop was doing something nefarious, and it turned out he he wasn't. He was just there to help the humans. You know, he said he was programmed not to harm humans, that they had rooted those evil, nefarious aspects out of the androids. It wasn't a part of his programming. He was there to help the humans out. And I love that he stuck to that element of his character from beginning to end. And then we have Corporal Hicks, who's played by Michael Biehn, a great character for Ellen Ripley to bounce off of. One of the only Marines that really had a true sense of what was going on. You know, he still had that, yeah, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to fight the aliens, I'm going to shoot things. But there's more to him than that. There is some depth, there is some heart to this guy. And we see that in how he acts with Newt and how he treats her and how he responds to Ripley. You know, he's not going to shut her down. He is listening to her and what she's got to say. He's one of the only smart characters in the series because he's actually listening to Ripley. She knows exactly what this is. She's been through this before. Let's hear her out. Let's not shut her down. Let's actually listen to what she's got to say, because that might save our lives at the end of the day. And it does save his life at the end of the day. I was glad that somebody was finally willing to listen to Ripley and what she had to say, and it saved his life in the end. Just wish more people would have been doing the same. The design, the aliens, that aspect of it, building upon everything that they did in the first film, and now we're just on a grander, bigger scale than we were in that first film. And it's one of those movies that I could easily pop on and go watch again. It's very rewatchable. If you ask me, it's actually a little bit more rewatchable than the first Alien movie. I think the first Alien movie works more on a first viewing because you know all the suspenseful stuff that's going to happen. You know all the surprises, all the horror stuff that's going to be happening. When you go and watch it again, not to say that it's a bad movie when you watch it a second time. It's definitely not a bad movie when you watch it a second time, but I don't think it works as well as this one does. Yeah, you'll know all the surprises in this one too, but this one is just that fun action sci-fi trip that you can take when you watch this movie. James Cameron just makes movies that are very rewatchable. This movie was so fun from start to finish. I love this movie. It was so fun. There's a lot more I could talk about in the good category. Let's go ahead and talk about what was mixed with Aliens. I don't really have anything for you guys in this mixed section here. Normally I would have one thing, but I had a lot of fun with this film. You know, I don't really have a lot of major critiques. I guess some of the dialogue can be a little stilted, you know, it can be a little cringy.
Game over, man. It's game over.
This is an action sci-fi film that came out of the 80s. Some of the dialogue might not quite work at times.
And they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Even when the dialogue can be a little cringy, it creates some of the most memorable lines in cinematic history.
Get away from her, you bitch!
It could be a little mixed. The over-the-top representation of some of these characters could be a little much for some people, but it really worked for me. Another thing that could be mixed is the fact that this does lean more sci-fi action over the horror aspect of it. It's the same thing that's happened in a lot of genres. It did kind of start to go off the rails, probably here with the second film of the series, going more sci-fi action, and it has come back to the more horror survival aspect of it with Alien Romulus, harkening back to the way the original film was made. You could say that that could be a mixed aspect of this, the fact that it did kind of start to veer off into another kind of genre. And a lot of people wanted to stay in horror, and it just happened to go because I think a lot of it is due to the fact that they did get James Cameron as the director, so it did lean more sci-fi action because that is more of his wheelhouse. Yes, he did more of a horror film with the first Terminator, but the second was very much a sci-fi action film, and he did that here with Aliens. And so I don't think it's too much of a surprise to see that this film and the series went in the direction that it did. But the other films in the series aside, for Aliens, I think it still works. That's mixed for some people. For me, not so much. I got nothing for you in this category. I thought Aliens was a blast from start to finish. Still kept in those horror, suspenseful elements from the first film, kept some of those elements from the first film, but I thought this one was very fun to watch. You know, I do lean more sci-fi action. I do appreciate that the series did kind of go in this direction, but I also appreciate that it was able to veer back to the roots of the series. So while I do think that the series probably should stay horror, for me personally, I do enjoy the sci-fi action elements of it more than the horror elements of it. I thoroughly enjoyed Aliens, so I've got nothing bad to say about this movie. I really enjoyed Aliens. I thought it was a fun ride from beginning to end. Overall, I think this movie definitely holds up. I think the first film holds up just a little bit more than this one does on a modern watch in 2024, but Aliens is such a fun ride. It's a classic sci-fi action film. I love these kind of films. I love revisiting these types of films from the 80s, from the 90s. They're so fun to watch, and James Cameron is such a great director, such a great visionary, always makes his films very, very entertaining. I thought all the supporting cast was so fun to watch. Sigourney Weaver, I thought she brought it it had so much more depth to her character in this movie. I think she did a great job. I thought all the actors did. I thought the production was great. The sound, the design, the look of the aliens, the look of the xenomorphs, the mother xenomorph, that was creepy. That was crazy. I love the design of that alien. Just everything about this movie was so fun. I failed to mention at the beginning of this that I did watch the special edition of this film. So there was some stuff that was included in this that was not included in the original theatrical release of Aliens. However, I'm not so sure where the differences lie. I just jumped right into the special edition, and I think the special edition was so fun to watch. If you're going to watch Aliens for the first time, I suggest watch this version. I don't have any reference for the original theatrical cut, but from the one or two things I know that were a little different about this version, watch the special edition of Aliens over the theatrical cut. I actually think it gives more depth to Sigourney Weaver's character, and it gives more context to some of the other stuff that's happening in this movie. So watch the special edition version of Aliens if you haven't already. Now, if you want to give this movie a rating, it's got to be a 4.5 out of 5 or an A- on the letter scale. Not a perfect movie, but a very, very fun movie. I really enjoy this movie, and if you're a fan of this series, if you're a fan of this genre, even if you're not big on horror, this one's more sci-fi action. I think you'll really like this film. Go ahead and give it a watch. If you have seen Aliens, go down in the comments section and let me know what you thought of the film and what you think of the franchise overall. Let me know what your favorite film in the franchise is down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Before you go, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. It always helps me out, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.